Okay, everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell. It is Thursday, December 26, 2013, in the year beyond Thunderdome, and this is our last news and views from the Nefarium for the year 2013. So, out with the old, in with the new. I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas wherever you are and spent some good time with your loved ones and families during the holidays. Now, last week on News and Views, I talked about the commercialization, the actual granting of mineral rights on the Moon and Mars. And I cited a couple of articles from a Dr. Joseph A. Resnick, PhD. And I suggested in my news and views that maybe these articles weren't jokes. Maybe even if they were elaborate jokes, maybe they were as serious as could be. Well, I actually heard back from Dr. Resnick. He sent me an email and assured me that no, it wasn't a joke at all, that this was entirely real. And he sent me a PDF file of the entire thing that was given at the International Space Development Convention. So apparently, yes, this is very real, and I'd like to thank Dr. Resnick for taking the time to contact us here at Giza Death Star and set the record straight. Those articles were entirely real, and those mineral rights are entirely real. Which brings us to the subject of today's news and views, because once again, it's space. And I want to set the stage. You'll know from those of you who are regular readers and listeners here, not only here, but also at Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts' site over at Solari.com, that we've been toying with the idea of a kind of economic manufacturing retrenchment by the Anglo-American elite into North America. Now, the background of this retrenchment is basically, we think, that in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union, the neoconservatives and so on within the American political and defense establishment were pushing for a kind of a unipolar, American-dominated New World Order. All right? And as we have seen since the collapse of the Soviet Union, that simply has not materialized. In fact, it's been met with a great deal of opposition, not only from traditional antagonists such as Russia or China, but more recently from so-called long-term American allies and friends, India, Brazil, Germany, and so on. So there's been considerable geopolitical and even financial pushback from some of these powers against this unipolar agenda. And in our thinking, in our hypothesis, if you will, we've looked at the possibility that the elite soon realized that they were not going to be able to push that agenda, and that in order to maintain their power base long enough to pursue the agenda by other means, they would have to retrench and rebuild the manufacturing and energy infrastructure in North America. Now, in that respect, we've argued two basic things: that the energy that is being developed in the United States right now, in Texas, in North Dakota, through fracking and so on, has basically now repositioned the United States to net zero. In other words, it's producing as much of its petroleum needs at home as it's importing. And that trend is going to increase to the point that the United States is going to produce more of its energy resources at home than it imports from overseas. Now, that has huge, obviously huge geopolitical implications, part of them being the re-examination on the part of oil producers like Saudi Arabia of their relationship to the United States vis-a-vis their relationship to other powers such as China. So that's underway in response to this. And there are a number of other aspects of this that we've looked at. 3D printing as being the manufacturing that they want to get into North America in a major way, and are pushing in a major way in North America. So in other words, this is one aspect of what they're looking at. Now, In addition to all of this, we've been suggesting that there's been, since World War II, a hidden system of finance apart from the normal black budget, all right? An entirely hidden system of finance that was put into place without any congressional or other oversight, precisely for the purpose of funding covert political operations and, much more importantly, for the purpose of funding a long-term covert research and development project of advanced technologies having to deal with outer space and with emulating the UFO. All right. Now that sounds like an extraordinary thing to say, but we've also seen in my model, I believe that that hidden system of finance has been put into place to collateralize space. In other words, to get the participation of the primary international banks in the world in this scheme. Whatever was found in space had to be collateralized. It was the old Venetian model that was put into play. The bankers would fund the expeditions, the trading expeditions, for a share in whatever was brought back. So that's the model I think that we're looking at. Now, there's been, in confirmation of this, as you know, a quiet and insistent, steady drumbeat of articles concerning the mining of asteroids and, as I indicated last week in the News and Views, mineral rights on planets like the Moon and Mars, all right, the Moon being our neighboring planet. Now, it stands to reason that if you're going to develop that capacity seriously, you have to have more launch capacity than currently exists in the more or less government-sponsored launch facilities around the world. Baikonur Cosmodrome in Russia, Cape Canaveral, Vandenberg Air Force Base in this country, French Guiana for the European program, and so on. In other words, the launch facilities that we know of are few and far between. But, and that brings us to today's news. The article I'm reading to you says, quote, 8 spaceports that are America's gateway to the stars, unquote. Now, this is another news story that has kept itself below the radar that I am now going to suggest is just now beginning to pop above the radar and is going to become a major story in the next few years. Because whether you know it or not, as we've been talking about Obamacare and housing bubbles and imminent collapse of the dollar and gold standards, you know, all the internet chatter that's been going on, this retrenchment has been quietly taking place to the point that not only have we seen expansion of energy production, pushing of 3D printing, we have also been building, and here comes the word, commercial spaceports. Okay. Now, this article, I'm going to cite 2 articles, all right? The first article that I mentioned, 8 spaceports that are America's gateways to the stars. The second paragraph of this reads as follows, quote, to date, only 8 non-governmental facilities in the entire country have received FAA licensing approval to operate as spaceports. Now, stop and think about that, folks. Only 8. But when was the last time you heard CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, or for those of you in Europe, Deutsche Welle or the BBC, talking about American spaceports that are already licensed to operate as spaceport facilities, okay? So in other words, we have 8 facilities that most of us didn't know about in this country that have been developed and are already licensed, all right? Now, this article goes on to say these spaceports have grown largely from former military and NASA installations, because why build a multi-million-dollar launch facility when you can just buy one, okay? Now, that's true. But there is something else that's hinted at in this article when you scroll to it, and I read this article in disbelief, and then I came down to a section called the Oklahoma Spaceport, and there's a picture of this thing. And it's a big, huge, long runway in the middle of absolutely nowhere in Oklahoma that is a licensed spaceport. It's physical. It's built. It exists. It wasn't built or a change from a military base. This was something specially built in the state of Oklahoma to be a spaceport. So being intensely curious, I clicked on the link in the article, and it led me to this, which is the site of the OSIDA, which stands for the Oklahoma Space Industry Development Authority. Let me repeat that. The Oklahoma Space Industry Development Authority. All right. This is an actual agency or branch of the state government of Oklahoma in Oklahoma City. All right. And let me read to you. It gives you an address, 501 Sooner Drive, P.O. Box 689, Burns Flat, Oklahoma, okay, which is in the middle of nowhere. And it gives you the phone number and the fax. All right, and here's what it says. And it's got a picture of this long runway. Quote, the Oklahoma Spaceport specializes in, not will specialize in, please note the present tense, specializes in horizontal takeoff and landing for reusable launch vehicles. The Oklahoma Spaceport received its launch site operator's license from the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of Commercial Space Transportation on June 12, 2006, becoming only the sixth recipient to receive a launch site operator's license from the Office of Commercial Space Transportation. The Oklahoma Spaceport became the first inland spaceport to establish a flight corridor for space operations in the national airspace system clear of military operating areas or restricted airspace. This arrangement means that space vehicles will not need any military permission to operate because the spaceport will have its own airspace. This information is published by the FAA, the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, in their 2009 U.S. Commercial Space Transportation Development and Concepts, subtitled Vehicles, Technologies, Spaceports Report, which is produced annually. And it goes on to tell us that this is a test and evaluation location for a company called Armadillo Airspace, apparently a local aerospace company, that it is a 2,700-acre facility located on major east-west, north-south thoroughfares close to Interstates 35 and Interstates 40, which would put it in the Oklahoma City area. It has one of the longest runways in North America, consisting of a runway of 13,503 feet and a 300-foot concrete runway with additional 1,000 feet overruns for both precision and non-precision approaches, and it's in an area of unobstructed and uncongested, you can look at the picture, airspace. So what does this mean, folks? Well, I find this very interesting because this is clearly a facility that was built with a lot of money to be a spaceport. Okay, it's not a converted military facility, in other words. It's already licensed, which means that the technologies, and please catch what I'm about to say, the technologies are already there. They just haven't been revealed yet. And I bet you a nickel that when they are, it's going to be some version of the fabled Internet Aurora spy aircraft, which is a pulsed ramjet aircraft, which incidentally, you'll recall, our good friend Dr. Ronald Richter down there in Argentina told us all about, but way back in 1951, okay? So the plot thickens. But now, the interesting thing is that this is built, and if it's built, it means the technology exists. But it's still a black technology. So in other words, folks, they're getting ready to roll out a lot. You don't spend this kind of money, and you don't license it, and then go on to talk about everything in the present tense, unless it already didn't exist. Unless it already existed. All right. So in other words, spaceports are going to be items in the news. Watch for them. Because it's coming. This is a part of that retrenchment, and it's all part of this ongoing effort to expand the economic bottle, to use the expression I used in Babylon's Banksters, out into space. It's happening before our eyes, folks. The financial elites are looking to outer space, and that's why you see all of the big changes geopolitically here down on Earth. Anyway, that's quite a mouthful for today's news and views, but I thought we'd better go out of the year and welcome in the new year with a bang. We do have a members vid chat tomorrow night for the members of the website. For the rest of you, I want to wish you a very happy holiday and the best of all good things in the coming new year. See you on the flip side, everybody.